Hello everyone, I once again welcome to all of you in another special session as far as UPSC mains examination is concerned on behalf of the Unique Academy. This time we would discuss the questions on international relations from GS paper 2 that was held yesterday. The examination was held yesterday in afternoon session, right? There were 4 questions as usual as far as IR is concerned in GS paper 2, and that pattern has remained same so far. Question number 9 and 10 are 2 10 markers as far as IR is concerned in paper 2, right? Question number 19 and 20 are the 15 markers. Let us try to analyze those 4 questions. Question number 9 was regarding India-Africa relations. And in number of lectures, I have been clarifying this, that gone are the days of asking simple, straightforward questions on bilateral relations. All 4 questions are different in the sense, all 4 questions somehow try to focus on a particular area, right, of international relations, and detailed kind of understanding is what is expected probably from the commission. That is what we can make out from number of questions since so many years now, at least 4 to 5 years. Look at this question. India-Africa digital partnership. It talks about relation between India and African continent as such, right? It asks us to focus on a particular area, domain, that is digital partnership, right? And then few things are added. Such kind of partnership is sort of achieving mutual respect, co-development, and long-term institutional partnerships. You are supposed to elaborate that, right? With some examples, you are supposed to elaborate that, right? So digital partnership is the core theme of this question, right? And as far as Africa is concerned, if you look at these 2 entities, I'm saying entities because one is nation state, other is continent. When you say Africa here, in case of digital partnership, you are supposed to understand that they are talking about African Union. Because African continent at continent level is trying to develop African free trade area, continental free trade area. It is called AFCTA, African Continental Trade Area, that is free trade area, right? And for that, for this free trade area to develop, what is important for them is seamless kind of transactions across the continent. And that is why they are looking forward to digital infrastructure development, right? And that is digital public infra development, digital public infrastructure. And obviously, African continent is facing a lot of problems, challenges in developing this infrastructure because of number of things like lack of digital literacy, right? Affordability, pricing, right? People's preferences, habits, number of things. All those challenges, problems that India faced in the last 10 years while increasing digital literacy, while reaching out to the people in the rural areas, those who don't have the paying capacity, how can we really make it affordable, right? A particular domain specific tailor-made kind of solutions. So all these things India has been doing successfully for number of years now. India can be looked at as a role model by third world countries as far as digital infra is concerned, as far as number of other things linked to digital infra are concerned, like identity development, digital identity development. You can talk about digital payments, right? Data protection, right? Data exchange for that matter. So all these aspects are the ones that you are supposed to cover in this answer. I would specifically talk about what points you are supposed to write as per this question is concerned, right? So this is one reference point. CTA, African Union is trying to do that. Pan-Africa sort of free trade area. And whenever we talk about Pan-African context, I just want to add something here because that would enhance your understanding. Pan-African things, I would say, India is deliberately promoting because China as a hegemonic state tries to keep things bilateral. It tries to keep things bilateral in Africa, country by country basis, and it tries to dominate and extract things. India's policy has been to counter Chinese preference for bilateralism. India's policy has been a preference for multilateralism. The formation of African Union India is promoting across continent connect, right? And there's an example of this. India has done a lot of things, but one very pertinent, relevant example in this case is of Pan-Africa Optical Fiber Network. India got constructed that optical fiber network for African continent. That is a precedent, some kind of an example in the past. India can work on similar lines. There is some kind of trust already, and that mutual respect we have earned because of India's preferred way of multilateralism. Please try to understand this. Strong states try to keep things bilateral in order to dominate, but India, despite being a strong state, vis-a-vis compared to number of African countries, we have preferred multilateral forum, obviously because of Chinese competition. But from their perspective, India is much more benign kind of a strong state as compared to China, and that is why they have that mutual respect. Apart from this point, multilateralism and the way India has adopted approach of mutual co-development, cooperation, right? So if you talk about co-development for that matter, right? China tries to do everything in a Chinese way, quote unquote. What does that mean? Chinese labor, Chinese technology, Chinese companies, right? So nowhere the local population, local countries involved, local companies are involved. Their model is different, right? Our model is different. Our model is of co-development, capacity building, right? Giving knowledge, transfer of technology. All these things are lucrative for African countries, and that is why co-development again adds to mutual respect that we need to understand. Obviously, mutual respect in India-Africa relation flows from the past as well. Gandhian struggle against colonialism, India's support to Nelson Mandela in that struggle against apartheid. But that's an old context. It's a 10 marker, please understand. You are not supposed to write all those things. Those are old things. Question is very specific. Do not deviate anywhere. Question is very specific about digital partnership. If you go on writing about all these things, MK Gandhi's efforts and then Nelson Mandela and all that, you are not going to get marks. So we have to focus on this mutual respect, right? Out of this thing, digital partnership. So you can begin with the optical fiber network that India has constructed for African continent. So that is where a different kind of collaboration can be seen. African Union, multilateralism, these points can sort of give you a beginning in terms of earning that mutual respect connected to this part, right? Then co-development, I gave you a few examples of that. In every sector for that, but coal mining, you talk about diamond mining, you talk about in different sectors in digital infra. India is not doing things in this manner. We'll give you, you just use it. No, we are co-developing it, and that earns respect, mutual respect, right? And then long-term institutional partnership. We have, in a way, cultivated African Union. I'm using this word very carefully. We have cultivated African Union. We have supported that multilateral organization, the regional organization. We want that regional organization to grow in influence so that China can be offset as far as India is concerned, right, in Africa. So institutional partnership, India, Africa Forum Summit is another important institutional framework, right, between India and Africa. So these summits frequently are organized, and a lot of things happen. Number of African countries and India collaborate on number of things. So I'm not generalizing that now because I just wanted to highlight this one. Using this institutional platforms rather, architecture, this can be promoted. Now let me come to this point. Digital infra, that is the core question for today, right? Let us talk about digital infra as such. So as I said in the beginning, digital partnership as far as India-Africa relations are concerned, the basis comes from digital public infrastructure that Africa is trying to build, and they need some kind of assistance in that, number one. Number two, for that, digital transformation strategy for Africa has been launched by AU, African Union, right? And the time period is 2020 to 2030, right? So for digital public infrastructure, African Union has already launched this. What is that? Digital Transformation Strategy for Africa 2020-2030, right? In the test series, I had asked question about, that is PSR test series actually. I had asked question about the digital partnership between India and ASEAN. Interestingly, the question came on India and AU. So we need to understand that is an emerging area as far as IR is concerned, right? So digital transformation strategy for Africa 2020-30. So this is what they are looking forward to, right? Now, through this initiative, for this purpose, this is objective. This is objective. This is initiative or the scheme. What are they looking forward to? They're looking forward to precisely three things. And those three things would tell you what India and Africa can do in this sector. What are those three things? First, and those three would be three pillars of India's digital partnership with African continent, right? First, digital identity. Digital identity, right? Second, digital payments. And third, data exchange. And more importantly, protection. Right? So this should have been the crux of the answer. Whatever I discussed, you mentioned this, you mentioned this, you mentioned AU, you mentioned this briefly in one sentence maybe, right? Institutional is this, right? And summit as well. This is the initiative and this is the core answer. Now in every section, what India and Africa can do in terms of digital partnership. And why Indian Africa only? That is because India has gone through similar kind of problems, similar kind of process, similar kind of challenges. And that is why that sharing of knowledge on experiences, on problems faced, on solutions offered can help Africa immensely, and they know it. And that is why this partnership is important today and in coming near future, right? Let us talk about these points now. See, what we are discussing right now is that partnership based on these 3 points: digital identity, payment, and exchange protection, data exchange protection. Let us begin with identity, digital identity, right? In India, billions of people, 1.37 billion people are actually using digital. See, I'm just trying to mention that's a huge number. 1.37 billion people are using digital identity. Are you getting this? Right? So that is linked to, you know it very well. It is linked to the Aadhaar card. Aadhaar number, right? Are you getting this? It is linked to Aadhaar number. What Africa is trying to do at African level, continent level, they are trying to create at every national level, the policies at the African level, and every nation is trying to do that. National identification number. They're trying to create national identification number, right? 12-digit number, just like what we have, unique identification number, UIN. This is UIN. That is Unique Identity Authority of India, UIDIA, has developed this. So on similar lines, they are developing NIN. The kind of problem that we faced in developing, launching, right, the UDI number, Unique Identity Number, right, of India, they are going to face similar problems. So India can do a lot in this case. So that is about digital identity, briefly speaking, right? I would release the model answers later on. Then the second aspect is digital payment, right? As far as this is concerned, again, India has achieved something massive, right? In a month, I'm talking about, in a month, India processes some 18 billion transactions, right? So the kind of scalability, the kind of reach, the kind of, quantity, volume that we have been processing digitally is something that is unprecedented, tremendous. given the population that we have, right? So India has already been on the path of digital payments at the mature level, right? And that is the indicator. Some 18 billion transactions a month. All of us do that, right? Through what is called UPI. UPI, right? Unified Payment Interface, right? UPI has been an important instrument for India in the foreign policy as well. And we are launching UPI with number of countries, Singapore, Southeast Asian countries, South European countries. Even in case of Africa, we are leveraging that. Namibia is a country from Africa which has already approached India for launch of UPI, and they're signing an agreement with National Payments Corporation of India, which handles UPI. That is one example. Namibia is already doing that, right? That is second aspect. Third, data exchange and protection. They're looking forward to, as I said, free trade area. They want to develop their trade within the region first, robust kind of intra-regional trade, intra-Africa trade. That will open a lot of employment opportunities, growth, and number of things, right? Economic benefits, we can call it in general, right? So data exchange and protection is very important. Data theft, data security, data piracy, number of issues are there. India has been dealing with that. As far as data exchange protection is concerned, one example, because we are supposed to elaborate with examples, I gave example of Namibia here, and I gave example of NINs that different countries are developing. One example is of Botswana. Botswana is an African country which has passed Data Protection Act. So we can help them in terms of developing such kind of acts, implementing them, implementation bottlenecks, experience sharing, right? Because India has been doing that on a massive scale. So that is how, these are three pillars in which this digital partnership is taking shape. And coming back to these points, it's not about doing a particular thing. It's about how you do that thing, right? We are doing it in a manner that respects each other's national integrity, sovereignty. We do not follow a model what is called neo-colonial model, something that China follows in a way, and that's why we earn mutual respect. The mutual respect also comes from co-development. We are not imposing things there, right? We are trying to understand their requirements, their problems, their challenges, and we are trying to provide tailor-made kind of solutions according to them, involving them in the process, co-development, right, in all these things. And then long-term institutional partnerships, I have talked about that, right? So that's how you are supposed to answer this question, right? Let's go to the next question. Question number 10. With the waning of globalization, post-Cold War world. So one reference point here is waning of globalization, right? And it talks about post-Cold War world, right? Is becoming a site of sovereign nationalism. Very interesting kind of question. You are supposed to elucidate that, right? You are supposed to elucidate that. Because you see, there is some kind of decoding here, right? There are three things here. One, sovereign nationalism. Let me pinpoint this thing to all of you. In my GSIR lectures, I always begin with Treaty of Westphalia, very important. So this is Westphalian concept. This is Westphalian concept. Okay, let me be very brief because this is short session, right? Ever since we witnessed this phenomenon called globalization, since particularly 1980s and more so since 1990s, more prominently since 1990s, globalization has challenged the Westphalian concept of sovereign nationalism. Right, globalization in a way has promoted internationalism, or rather globalism, right? Okay, so in that sense, globalization had dampened, reduced significance of sovereign nationalism. Territory, right? Significance of territory was falling, and as if a single world, right, was developing, something which was called global village kind of a concept, right? So is it that it is now waning, declining? And what kind of post-Cold War world are we witnessing now? Is it again becoming a site of sovereign nationalism? The answer is yes. Since when? What are the domains where exactly we are observing sovereign nationalism? I would talk about that, right? So this is the basic idea, background of the question that we are discussing, right? Okay. Let us talk about now those domains, those areas where sovereign nationalism can be seen. First domain is political, right? Second domain is economic. Third domain is technology. And fourth domain is environment, or you can call it global commons. Global commons. We can talk a lot about all these things, but I'm just trying to keep it brief, right? So political domain, economic domain, technological domain, environmental commons domain, that is where we are observing sovereign nationalism. So in other words, sovereign nationalism is order of the day. It is getting manifested in almost every sector. And you can divide your answer in this manner. So for example, if you talk about political domain, right? What is happening? We are seeing a number of conflicts which are going on, right? Number of conflicts. So Russia attacking Ukraine, Israel-Palestine, Gaza war, Israel-Hamas, Israel attacking Iran, US briefly intervening in Iran, right? And confrontation going on between different countries, Chinese hegemony in Indo-Pacific, right? So all these things are indications of sovereign nationalism in political domain. China is literally claiming South China Sea, right? And those islands. So that all these indicate political manifestation of sovereign nationalism, right? Conflicts, hegemony, right? Territorial claims. You can write a number of things there, right? As far as political domain is concerned, you can also talk about the UN reforms. I'm pointing out to UN reform because that is again a question. I think question number 20 is regarding UN reforms. One interesting aspect of IR is those 4 questions can be interconnected. That's very interesting thing. You can add energy as well for that matter. Energy security. There is question on energy security, and there as well you see sovereign nationalism dominating somehow, right? So political domain, economic domain. So what do we see as far as economic domain is concerned, right? You can again talk about a lot of things. You can talk about what is happening on the platform of WTO, what is happening on the platform of G20, and in general global north and global south, and again fault lines within global north and global south. So this is where nationalism comes in, sovereign nationalism, right? So here as well, and WTO. In general, as far as economic aspect is concerned, multilateralism is declining. Multilateralism was an aspect promoted by globalization. What we are observing now is plurilateralism, and that plurilateralism, that means very less number of countries coming together and doing something. That plurilateralism is strictly governed by what is called economic nationalism. Economic nationalism, that is sovereign nationalism in the domain of economics. The best example of this, currently speaking, right, as far as economic nationalism is concerned. So an aspect of sovereign nationalism in the domain of economics is economic nationalism. This is amply visible in policies of Donald Trump. So America First policy, right? MAGA, Make America Great Again policy. All these things are indicators of economic nationalism. India's own Atmanirbhar Bharat is also an indication of what? Sovereign nationalism in economic domain, right? Then technology. There is technological war going on. I don't need to explain that. Everyone knows that, right? In the domain of 5G technology, communication, in the domain of AI, artificial intelligence, right? Number of chatbots of US versus DeepSeek of China, right? So economic nationalism in the domain of technology as well. Then, and all those things, cyber attacks, cyber threats and everything. Environmental global commons, right? This global north-south debate comes here as well. And there are fault lines within global south and global north, right? That indicates environmental global commons in the domain of these, in the domain of environmental global commons, the manifestation of sovereign nationalism. Every country is looking at this problem from their own perspective. Again, the best example that we have is Trump's exit from Paris deal. Is best example of what? Sovereign nationalism undermining agenda of environmental conservation, right? Okay, so you can give a number of examples to elucidate things, right? Okay. One thing that I forgot to mention, I would do that now, having explained all these things, is exactly where this trend started, right? We saw globalization from 1990s onwards, and a lot of things happened over a period of time. But the first setback that we see as far as globalization is concerned is since 2008-9, that financial crisis. From that point onwards, many people say that the new trend called deglobalization started, or you can call it sovereign nationalism in the economic domain and different other domains, right? So deglobalization from 2008-9 onwards. A lot of things can be talked about as far as this topic is concerned, right? I can mention another thing because there is a mention of nationalism. Globalization was an important manifestation of modernity, and it was expected that modernity would wash out the primordial identities, and the world will become global, and there will be global culture, right? Humanity and global culture. But exactly opposite has happened. Because of globalization, cultural homogenization, one single type of culture across the globe, has generated reaction from different local cultures. And what we are observing as part of this, right? Ethnic nationalism. So this also comes in what is called ethnic nationalism, the political domain, where you see emergence of sovereign nationalism, right? So Baloch people asking for a sort of separation from Pakistan can be cited as an example of ethnic nationalism, or Kurdish people in Middle East, in Turkey, Iran, Syria, and different other countries, right? Kurdish nationalism can be cited as an example of ethnic nationalism. You can write a lot if you have basic idea of IR, right? From any good source, right? By any good discussion, classroom discussion, a lot can be written. And interestingly, we discuss all these things in the classroom somehow. Anyways, so I hope you are understanding merely discussing case studies in monolithic manner, merely discussing case India, Pakistan, India, China. This is not really going to help you. While you discuss these case studies, different dimensions, entire game of international politics, global politics is to be understood in order to understand such kind of questions and to answer them for that matter, right? Let's now move to other two questions. These were two 10 markers. Let us now go to 15 markers. Question number 19 and 20, right? So question number 19, 20 marker, 250 words. Energy security. Question is on, again, specific kind of domain, constitutes the dominant kingpin of India's foreign policy, right? Is linked with India's overarching influence in Middle Eastern countries, right? How would you integrate energy security with India's foreign policy trajectories? It says that means there is some kind of a futuristic aspect to the question. There is a futuristic aspect to the question. That is why your answer should be a bit of futuristic based on what is happening right now and what is the possibility of happening tomorrow in terms of energy security, right? So in the coming years, right, it clearly tells us about two things. Because it is a futuristic question, it asks you to discuss about the conventional energy sources, right, and renewable energy sources. In the test series this year, I had asked question regarding India-Saudi Arabia relations in terms of emerging new areas of cooperation. Mohammed bin Salman, the Prime Minister and Prince of King in waiting of Saudi Arabia, being a young person, has come up with number of transformations in their domestic area, and he is looking forward to expansion in renewables because he has that awareness. At some point of time, the conventional energy sources, or what can be called as fossil fuels, are going to get exhausted. And what will happen to those countries which are nothing but desert in terms of their future? So he's looking forward to expansion in renewables, and that becomes an important area, upcoming area, the futuristic perspective, upcoming area where India can forge partnerships with West Asian countries, right? Okay, so conventional and renewable, both aspects are to be covered, right? Let's look at the entire question once again, having highlighted the futuristic aspect of this question, right? Okay. Let us now try and understand this question Again, so question is on energy security. I have already pointed out, we will cover both of them, right? And again, what has been mixed with that? I would talk about that. What is mixed is India's foreign policy. These two keywords we need to understand, right? So three things I would say. One, energy security. Number two, foreign policy of India with obviously Middle Eastern countries. And number three, trajectories. What is going to happen in future? So this is how you are supposed to answer this question, right? Let me talk about energy security first, as far as India is concerned, because the question is on India's foreign policy. Since 2000, particularly since 2000, India's growth rate increased like anything, right? It breached what was in a way called Hindu growth rate. It breached that Hindu growth rate of 3.54 and we went beyond it 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.5 up to 9.5 rather, right? Very impressive growth rate, plus India's massive population, right? Very impressive growth rate, and India's massive population is equal to massive energy need. Please try to understand this. Since 2000, right, growth rate was impressive. People got purchasing power, right? Their purchasing power increased, demands increased, and demand of energy exponentially increased. So since 2000, this component has become very, very important, crucial as far as India's foreign policy is concerned, right? A major chunk of energy security comes from the conventional sources and from oil and natural gas, so to say, fossil fuels. So I'm repeating that. A major chunk of energy security comes from conventional sources, and a major chunk of those conventional sources comes from Middle East, or what is called West Asia, right? Okay, so this is another important context we are supposed to keep in mind when discussing energy security of India, right? So massive need of energy. And these countries become very important from the perspective of what I'm repeating here, oil and natural gas, right? I would name a few countries. Saudi Arabia, very important for us. UAE, another very important country. Iraq, very important. Iran. So these are major countries in Middle East and very important partners of India as far as energy security, leading countries to meet India's energy needs. No doubt India has tried to diversify India's energy sources from African countries, from Asian countries, some of them. We are trying to tap sources of Myanmar as well, for that matter, Nigeria for that matter, right? And we are even looking forward to tap energy sources in Latin America. That is distinct, but yes, on the cards. In spite of India developing number of alternate, Russia for that matter, recently Russia has been in news. Trump has pressurized India because of that. The cheap oil that we are buying from Russia, natural gas. Russia happens to be one of the largest producers of natural gas in the world, second largest rather. Despite diversification in recent years, this region is kingpin, right? This region happens to be a kingpin as far as meeting India's energy requirements are concerned, and that's why it's crucial, right? So Indian foreign policy is largely governed by energy security as far as Middle East is concerned. It is also governed by diaspora, particularly in UAE. If I'm not wrong, I have read this, some 35% population in UAE happens to be Indian population, right? So diaspora is an important aspect. So energy security, foreign policy of India. The moment you talk about foreign policy of India and India's influence, certain important things are to be mentioned. Having clarified energy requirements and energy security in conventional area, I would talk about the unconventional part. Wait a minute, right? Let us go to the foreign policy aspect now, right? So, foreign policy of India, Middle Eastern countries. What all things you should mention? You should mention, obviously, look west policy of India. Look west policy of India. You should talk about IMEC. You should talk about I2U2. Right? Some important initiatives that India has got. Apart from this, you should also talk about India's bilateral relations briefly. Something that I have talked about already. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iraq, Iran, right? Now, prospects क्या है, ये सब ठीक है, we know it, इसको बस mention करना है, this to be mentioned, that's it. Trajectories क्या है? The major problem, Saudi Arabia, UAE, right, Iraq and Iran. Chabahar port is very important, please understand. Even though under US pressure, if we reduce the import of oil, Chabahar is an important kingpin, is important link as far as seamless flow of all these goods are concerned, right? So US pressure, right? US, Russia, China dynamics would have bearing on India's relation with Iran, for that matter even Iran, right? And that's why that aspect is to be sort of mentioned in the answer, right? Saudi Arabia, UAE are close to US, so not a very major or important problem there, right? But Chinese footprint is increasing, that we would take into consideration. US has pressurized us recently, right? We don't know in what direction the relations would head now. India is approaching China in terms of economic cooperation. If that balance persists, some sort of balance with US and some sort of balance with China, post Galwan, we had almost nothing in terms of economic cooperation. If that now becomes a bit normal, we can leverage that in the West Asia, because Chinese footprint is also increasing there, right? So we can, use it to our benefit. We are talking about trajectories, right? Then these relations are also contingent upon two things, right? Massive development is going on in the Middle East. Again, so one is Gaza war, how Israel-Hamas conflict would head in the future, right? Head towards what end, that we need to understand. That would have a bearing. You must mention that. And the persistent problem of Israel versus Iran, and US has joined it in a way, right? So those are the sort of tensions which would have bearing on the future trajectories, right? So that aspect we are supposed to be 20 marker hai, bahut kuch bata raha hu. So it has to be brief, right? You talk about these factors which would decide the trajectories, right, of India's energy security, to what extent we can rely on Middle East. We are diversified, no doubt about that. The last aspect is obviously unconventional sources of energy, right? And I gave an example of Saudi Arabia's Prince and Prime Minister, Mohammed bin Salman. He has been transforming their civil society. So sort of transformation he is looking forward to, and diversification. So he knows very well that significance of Saudi Arabia, and for that matter every Middle Eastern country, is only because of the natural resources, fossil fuels to be very precise. The moment fossil fuels get exhausted, these countries would be ignored, and he doesn't want that. He's looking forward to diversification. So here comes that point of renewable energy sources, and India can cooperate with them. These are the regions which are again where there's abundant availability of solar energy. India has already launched ISA, International Solar Alliance, and we can do a lot of things there. You can mention that, right? So that's how this answer has to proceed. Now let's talk about the last question, question number 20, right? So this talks about the reform process in United Nations, right? Remains unresolved. It talks about something that has remained unresolved. I'll pinpoint that. I'll zero down on that because of the delicate imbalance of East and West. While reading this question, I feel like I'm thrown back to the Cold War, because nobody talked about East and West until recently, right? It was more about global north and global south, but somehow this has again taken the center stage, East and West, right? East and West, and more importantly, entanglement of USA versus Russo-Chinese alliance. This is a statement. This is a statement. It is defined in the context. Question aage aa raha hai. Question is there after the statement, right? But if you look at this entire thing and all the questions that we have discussed so far, nowhere my explanation was confined to India and another country, right? Whole gamut of global politics is to be understood. And that's why we organize lectures in that manner. I hold thorough discussions as far as global politics is concerned, because unless students understand the framework of global politics, it will be difficult to deal such kind of questions, right? So the reform process in the United Nations remains unresolved because of the delicate imbalance of East and West. That is one factor. So this is one factor in general, and particularly this factor, US Russo-Chinese alliance. अब क्वेश्चन क्या है? It asks us to examine on one hand, इसको एग्जामिन करना पड़ेगा, and evaluation देना पड़ेगा. You are supposed to end the answer with a comment, evaluatory comment, right? So critically evaluate the East-West policy confrontations in this regard. East-West policy confrontations in this regard. I would divide it in two parts. One, I would clearly mention East-West confrontation. East-West confrontation. And what sides do we see of East-West confrontation? That is one area. Second, I would say that unresolved reform kya exactly? That is UNSC. Is there any other reform in the past जो सक्सेसफुल रहा? उसके बारे में आपको बताऊंगा, उसका एग्जांपल दे सकते हो आप. That was in ECOSOC, right? Economic and Social Council of the UN, right? So unresolved kind of reforms UNSC में है, वो क्यों है, कैसा बात करेंगे, right? है ना? एंड ये इम्बैलेंस जो बना हुआ है, ये इम्बैलेंस का जो वर्ड है ना, ये आपको कौन समझाएगा? ये समझाएगा. You are supposed to examine, right? So examine everything, right? Tell them कि what is imbalance. I would talk about the confrontation, right? What is unresolved reform UNSC, वो क्यों है, उसकी बात करेंगे, उसको एग्जामिन करेंगे, right? And then we would give you a critical evaluation of policy confrontation, right? Okay. So let's begin with this part because that is the core part, reform process. So past reforms, ECOSOC के reforms from outside UN किए गए थे. Outside UN, मतलब number of countries created a group and that group suggested some reforms and those reforms were passed. UNGA is a huge body where there are more than 190 countries. The reform procedure is quite complex one. Reform procedure of UNO is contained in Article 108 and 109 of the UN Charter. Both are complicated in the sense both require special majority of 2/3 countries not only signing the resolution for reform but also ratifying from their respective parliaments and bodies in their respective nations. More importantly, that 2/3 majority, which includes both signing and ratification, must include P5. If any one P5 country does not become part of it, that is considered as veto. So this is a complex process, and P5 have been status quoist. You talk about any country for that matter. Some of the articles in newspapers would say that UK and France look a bit more in favor of reforms, and US and China look quite against it, right? But it's not like that. US also has expressed desire of rather support, not desire as such, support to India's inclusion into permanent members of the UNSC. But the point of the matter is, since 1945, let me be very, very clear about it. ये verbal offer देना, verbal sympathize करना, ये बहुत बार किया गया है. उसको offer नहीं बोलते. There is not a single resolution of UN, right, which can be cited as an example. Right, this resolution was brought to reform UNSC to include India. If US has so much of desire, I backtrack from that word desire because अगर US का desire हो तो resolution लेकर के आता. आज तक कोई resolution लाया नहीं गया, right? US brought resolution for declaring Jerusalem as capital of Israel, though the resolution was defeated in UNGA. Defeat होने दो ना, कोई problem नहीं, resolution लेके तो आओ. There's not a single example of resolution. So we can safely say that P5 are status quoist, right? That is an important hindrance, right? फिर उसमें ये जो दिया गया है ना, right? So ये इसको P1 versus P2 बोलोगे आप, ये दो वेटो पावर्स, ये एक वेटो पावर, बट इसके पीछे दो और है, सो P2 है इधर, तो it becomes P3. But the point is इसमें rift आ रहा है because of Trump these days. But one veto is enough. It is something of that kind, right? So that is a challenging aspect as far as reform is concerned. ECOSOC में जो रिफॉर्म्स हुए क्वाइट इंपॉर्टेंट रिफॉर्म्स थे एंड उसके रिजल्ट दिखे MDG और SDG में. इंप्लीमेंटेशन काफी अच्छा रहा. कंट्री स्ट्रेटेजी नोट्स and headquarter level reforms were conducted as far as ECOSOC is concerned, but that is not our area as far as question is concerned. But you can give an example how ECOSOC was reformed effectively if major countries decide to reform UN, right? What has been remained unresolved as far as reform agenda is concerned, that is reform of UNSC, particularly reform of P5. the permanent 5, because as far as non-permanent members are concerned, that number has been increased. Initially the number was 6, now the number is 11. This much reform has been done. What is unresolved, precisely speaking, very pinpointedly speaking, that is the number of permanent members. The number of permanent members, right? Okay. So in this case, now delicate imbalance. Let us, this is one area we identified. Let us go to the next area. What is happening now? UNSC is a body that reflects post-World War II power equations. Now, a lot of transformation has happened. Asia, which has got more than 60% population, has only one representation, right? Europe, which is a very small continent, has got disproportionately large representation, 2.5, right? 2.53 for that matter, right? Okay, so that is imbalance. Now, what is happening as far as East-West confrontation is concerned and how it is impacting the demand? Demand kya hai? G4 ka apna demand hai. G4 is demanding. Coffee Club is opposing that. They want consensus. And regional conflicts is the reason why they are opposing it. For example, Pakistan is part of Coffee Club because it doesn't want India to be included. And now, India-Pakistan relation, or rather conflict, is becoming also a site of East-West confrontation. Because the way Trump treated the US Pakistan military general Munir, right? That is very interesting case, right? The way China is entering into that India-Pakistan conflict. So every regional conflict, Israel-Palestine, Israel-Iran, India-Pakistan, Russia-Ukraine. So all these are sites today. So Ukraine, Russia, India-Pakistan, Israel-Palestine, Israel-Iran. So all these are the sites of confrontation. And these sites of confrontation, though they look like regional conflicts, now this is becoming a site of East-West confrontation. And if there is East-West tension, there is very less possibility of development of consensus. Forget about global consensus. Even a small body like G20 cannot develop consensus. If a small body like G20 cannot develop consensus, the reform agenda is out of question. That is what you are supposed to write as part of the first aspect of this question. Second aspect is this one. USA versus Russo-Chinese alliance, right? So clearly you mentioned that the Ukraine war has intensified this. Indo-Pacific has intensified this. So Indo-Pacific, Ukraine are two sides. And number 3 is Israel-Palestine. Very important Syrian aspect you must add to it as far as this part is concerned. इसके बारे में आप 3 चीजें लिखो क्लियरली. ये जो डायकोटोमी देखने को मिलता है, एक है इंडो पैसिफिक सिंस मोर देन 2 decades नाउ. यहां पे इट्स यूएस वर्सेस चाइना प्राइमरीली. रशिया कम्स एज पार्ट ऑफ चाइना. देन इजराइल पैलेस्टाइन एंड Syrian crisis. Bashar al-Assad government is overthrown, regime is overthrown. Bashar al-Assad was an ally of Russia, Iran. And it was crucial connecting point for that axis of resistance in Israel-Palestine. These are all connected things. And if you look at the way these countries are adopting policies, their policies are confrontational, right? So Assad is supported by Russia. He would have been overthrown way back in Jasmine Revolution. But at that time, Russian timely support to Bashar al-Assad saved him. So Russia wants to maintain its influence. China wants to maintain its own influence in Central Asia through SCO, in Indo-Pacific, in Middle East, in Africa for that matter. So confrontation is going on, right? Then Israel-Palestine as well, which is linked to that axis of resistance. Hamas for that matter. Hamas, Iran connect, Hezbollah in Lebanon, right? तो ये सारे जो areas है यहाँ पे इनकी policy कैसी है? Confrontational. And you must provide a critical evaluation in the end. What is the critical evaluation? There's no doubt about it that UNSC needs dire reforms because UNSC has been singularly ineffective in number of things, in preventing Ukraine war, in preventing Israel-Palestine conflict, in preventing the humanitarian crisis that unfolded in Palestine, Ethiopia, Myanmar, right? In number of countries, the failures in COVID pandemic. So it is because of importance of UNSC. And the importance of UNSC can be easily underlined by the number of vetoes these 3 countries have used in recent years. Most of the vetoes have come from 3 countries, right? So critical remark is this, critical evaluation is this, that these three countries in particular, East-West in general, right, has been confrontational in their policies, and this confrontation is going to derail any kind of effort as far as reform agenda is concerned, right? This is how you are supposed to analyze things and answer those questions. One concluding remark from my side to all the aspirants: please do not keep your outlook narrow. If you read all the articles of Hindu and Express, develop your acumen, what is happening in different parts of foreign policy of India. And if you develop that understanding of global politics, that would help you immensely. Thank you so much.